So get this. Today we're going deep on soccer analytics.
Ooh, nice.
You guys sent in like a ton of research on how data science is, like changing the game. And it's pretty wild. We've got papers with titles like predicting the future performance of soccer players, predictive analysis and modeling football results, and even some on like monitoring fatigue with accelerometers and stuff.
Yeah, you've definitely put together a pretty interesting mix here, like covering everything from individual players all the way up to like team tactics and how to prevent injuries. And some of these papers, they get into some really complex stuff like statistics and machine learning.
Don't worry, we're going to break it all down, like the key insights, what it all means for you as a soccer fan.
Right.
Okay, so one thing that I thought was really interesting was like this idea of predicting how well a player will do in the future based on, just data. The Arndt Briefeld paper from 2016.
Yeah. It talks about using machine learning to predict a player's kicker rating. Based on, what they've already done on the field, like, the types of passes they make.
Sure.
And even their position. It's kind of like a crystal ball for talent scouts.
It's not magic, but it's pretty close. So they use a method called support vector regression.
Support vector regression.
For SVR. Think of it like, imagine trying to draw a line.
Okay.
That like best shows a player's performance over time, SVR. It looks at tons of data, like, passes, shots, distance covered, and finds a line that fits best. And that line, it helps predict their future performance.
So instead of just relying on, like, gut feelings and scouting reports.
Right.
Teams could actually use data to find good players.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's not just for professional teams either. Like, think about youth programs or even fantasy football. Could completely change, how we evaluate players.
So we can predict how a player's going to do. But can we predict who's going to win a match?
That's the big question, right?
Yeah.
Like, can we predict the outcome?
Yeah. The paper, Babudakor from 2018.
Okay.
Look at this specifically in the English Premier League. They used a bunch of machine learning stuff, random forests and support vector machines.
Okay.
And they looked at like normal things like team form, past results.
Sure.
But they also looked at betting odds.
Betting odds, wow.
Yeah, from bookmakers like Bet365 and Pinnacle Sports.
Wait, hold on. Betting odds. How does that help predict who's going to win?
We got to think of it like it's like using the wisdom of the crowd. Like bookmakers use a ton of data to, set their odds.
Okay.
And those odds kind of show how likely different outcomes are.
Yeah.
So by using that, the researchers got a better view of each match. So it's like combining expert analysis with like actual hard data.
Exactly. And their predictions were.
And how accurate were they?
Pretty good. They predicted home wins correctly like 80% of the time.
80%? Wow.
But draws, not so much.
Oh, that's got to be hard to predict.
Yeah, only 9%.
Draws are always tricky.
Yeah, even for like the experts.
It comes down to those moments, those unpredictable, brilliant plays or,
Yeah, or those blunders.
Total blunders, and you just can't really capture that in a model.
So we've talked about predicting individual performance and even match outcomes.
Okay.
But what about injuries? We can't forget about that.
Right. That's a big one. And you send over a bunch of papers that focus on that.
Yeah.
Like using data to, understand and predict injuries.
Yeah.
And a lot of them focus on using wearable tech.
Oh, cool.
Like GPS and accelerometers.
Like those fitness trackers?
Yeah, exactly. Like the StatSports Viper. That one's mentioned in a paper from Malone et al. In 2017.
Okay, so what kind of stuff can they track?
Well, they can track things like total distance,
okay,
high-speed running, and even the number of times a player accelerates or decelerates.
Wow, that's a lot of information.
It is, and researchers are finding some pretty strong links between movement and injury risk.
So it's not just about like how much you train, but how...
It's exactly, yeah. Gabbett in 2016 dives into this idea of the acute chronic workload ratio.
Acute chronic workload ratio.
Or ACWR.
ACWR.
Yeah, which basically compares a player's recent training with their long-term training history. And spikes in that ratio. Okay. Especially when it comes to intense activities like sprinting.
Yeah.
It can be a red flag for injuries.
So if you suddenly push your body too hard, you're more likely to get hurt.
Right. Like if you're not used to it, it's going to be a problem.
But I thought one of the papers said that not training enough could also be risky.
Yeah, that's right. Ehrman et al. In 2016, they found that players who constantly train below a certain level, they might actually be at higher risk too.
Interesting.
Especially during match play.
As they're not prepared.
Yeah, they're just not ready for those bursts of activity.
So it's like finding that balance.
It's all about finding that sweet spot,
Yeah, that sweet spot, like the optimal training load.
Right.
So you can perform well and avoid getting hurt.
And data can actually help us do that.
Okay.
Move away from those one-size-fits-all training plans.
Yeah.
And tailor training to each player.
That's cool.
It is.
All right, this is fascinating stuff.
It is.
But we've only just, scratched the surface here.
Totally.
So let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and explore how we can use data to analyze team tactics.
Sounds good.
And get even deeper into the world of soccer analytics.
Can't wait.
Okay, so we've talked about predicting how players will do.
And even predicting match outcomes.
Yeah.
But can we use data to understand how tired a player feels?
You'd be surprised.
Really?
There's a paper here by Carey and his colleagues from 2016 that actually looks at that, predicting how tired a player feels in real time.
So we're talking about like more than just those surveys after training?
Right, more than just, asking players.
Yeah, where they rate how hard they work.
Yeah, exactly. Like the rate of perceived exertion.
Rate of perceived exertion.
Or RPE.
RPE?
Yeah, but traditionally, like, we get that info after the session.
Right.
But then it's kind of too late to adjust,
Yeah.
If you could predict it during the session, you could actually, like, change the training to prevent overexertion and even injuries.
But how do you even measure how someone's feeling?
Well, they used a machine learning algorithm called random forest regression.
Random forest regression. And it analyzes all sorts of variables during training, like session duration, distance covered, speed, heart rate.
So it's like?
And uses that to predict RPE.
Like a digital coach?
Kind of, yeah.
So it can tell when a player's getting tired?
Yeah, even before the player realizes it themselves.
Like, that's really cool.
Like, imagine a fitness tracker for a whole team. Coaches can use that to, like, really fine-tune the training.
Yeah.
And make sure they're pushing the players enough, but not too much.
So that connects back to, like, what we talked about with ACWR.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. One paper mentioned something called most demanding passages of play.
Oh, yeah.
What's that all about?
So this is where we look at the match itself.
Okay.
And analyze those, like, super intense periods.
Okay.
So Kasamakana and his colleagues, they had a paper in 2019.
Okay.
And they used GPS data to break down matches into chunks.
Okay.
And they looked at stuff like speed, acceleration, and distance covered in those chunks.
So like those bursts of energy when players like sprint to intercept a pass.
Exactly, yeah. Or make a bunch of quick moves to get past defenders.
Okay.
They used a technique called a moving average.
A moving average?
It's like, imagine sliding a window along the match timeline.
Okay.
And calculating the average intensity in that window.
I can picture like a graph with peaks and valleys.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Showing those moments where things get crazy.
And did they find anything interesting?
They did. They found that those demanding passages, they differ depending on the player's position. It's like midfielders.
Yeah.
They tend to have more high-intensity bursts.
Than, say, defenders or?
Yeah, defenders or forwards.
Because they're running more.
Exactly. They're covering so much ground.
Okay, and how can coaches use this?
Well, knowing when those intense periods happen, it helps them design better training programs.
So like drills that mimic the demands of the match.
Preparing players for the real deal.
Not just physically, but
also mentally.
Yeah, mentally too.
And they also found that these demanding passages often happen towards the end of each half.
Oh, that's interesting.
When everyone's tired.
Yeah, and the pressure's on.
Right. So it's not just about being in shape.
It's about mental toughness.
Yeah, mental toughness, game management.
So data can help us understand, like...
It can really unlock those, like, critical aspects of performance.
I like that.
Yeah.
We're seeing how data can give us this deeper understanding of how soccer's played.
At every level, yeah.
All right, let's move on to the last part of our deep dive.
It's good.
Where we'll explore how we can use data to analyze team interactions and strategy.
The team as a whole.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about predicting player performance, preventing injuries, and, like understanding those intense moments during a match. But now I want to look at the team as a whole. How can data help us analyze how teams work together and their strategies?
This is where it gets really interesting. We can actually use tracking data to, like, visualize those complex interactions that happen during a match.
Okay, so we're talking about more than just those heat maps that show where players spend their time, right?
So we're going way beyond individual movement and actually looking at, the connections and the patterns between players. One of the papers, Football Tracking Networks, it's by Buldu and his colleagues, it introduces this idea of ball flow networks. So imagine the field like a giant checkerboard, divided into a grid. And each square on that grid is like a node in a network.
Each node is like a different area of the field.
Exactly. And imagine like tracking the ball as it moves during the match. Every time that ball is passed from one node to another, it creates a connection in the network.
So we're basically creating a map of like the ball's journey across the field, showing us the pathways of the game.
Exactly. And by looking at these ball flow networks, we can actually see patterns in how a team likes to play. Are they building their attacks down the sides?
Right.
Do they prefer, those short passes in the midfield? Or are they launching long balls forward? The data can actually tell us.
It's like we can see the team's tactical plan, come to life. We could even compare these networks between teams, see how their approaches are different.
Absolutely. It gives us a whole new level of insight into how teams function together. And it's not just about the ball. Those same researchers also looked at something called sign proximity networks.
Okay.
So instead of focusing on the ball, they actually looked at the distances between players.
How do those work?
So imagine if two players are close together, it's a positive connection. If they're far apart, it's a negative connection. By looking at these proximity networks, you can see how the team organizes itself defensively and offensively.
So a team that uses a high pressing style, where they try to win the ball back quickly, they probably show a lot of positive connections, right? Because their players are all close together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
On the other hand, a team that likes to counterattack, they might show more negative connections. Their players are spread out, ready to take advantage of any gaps.
We can actually see these tactical choices just by looking at player positions. And you can even see individual roles emerge, right? Like maybe there's a midfielder who connects different areas of the field with their passing.
Exactly. These networks can show us those hidden structures and relationships that really drive team performance. It's not just about individual skill, it's about how those individuals come together.
It's been so interesting to really dive deep into soccer analytics. From predicting how a single player will perform to understanding the complexities of an entire team, it's clear that data is revolutionizing, the way we watch, understand, and even play the game.
And we're just getting started. I mean, as data collection and analysis gets even better, who knows what other groundbreaking insights we'll find. The future of soccer, it's connected to data, and it's going to be so cool to see where it goes from here.
Thanks for joining us on this exploration. Until next time, keep an eye on the data because it's showing us a whole new side to the sport that we love.